The skies over New York darkened on an otherwise normal Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't clouds that blocked the sun, but something much worse. 7 massive ships, each larger than a football stadium, hovered silently above the city. Similar scenes played out over every major city around the world at exactly the same moment. Dr. Alan Wright dropped his coffee mug, barely noticing as it shattered on the floor of the observatory. The computer screens in front of him displayed readings that made no sense. The ships had appeared out of nowhere. No approach trajectory, no warning. They simply materialized in low Earth orbit. "Are you seeing this?" his assistant asked, voice shaking. Alan nodded slowly. "Call everyone, now." Across the country in Washington, D.C., Navy Commander Susan Kelly was rushed from her desk to the Pentagon's crisis room. Generals and admirals hurried about, their faces pale with shock. None of their expensive defense systems had detected the ships until they were already in position. "Commander Kelly," the Joint Chiefs Chairman said when she entered, "you're our foremost expert on theoretical alien contact protocols." Susan wanted to laugh. Theoretical was the key word. No one had actually expected to use those protocols. "Sir, I wrote papers on this, but I never thought—" "Well, they're asking for you specifically," he interrupted. The room went silent. "What do you mean they're asking for me?" Susan's mouth went dry. A communications officer spoke up. "They broadcast a message in perfect English. They requested to speak with military leadership, not political. When we sent identification of our top generals, they rejected them and requested you by name." Susan felt the blood drain from her face. "How do they know who I am?" No one had an answer. 3 hours later, Susan stood on the roof of the Pentagon, the agreed meeting point. A small alien craft descended from the larger ship above. It made no sound as it landed. The door opened, revealing a tall figure that had to duck to exit the craft. The alien stood at least 8 feet tall. Its skin was pale blue with a pattern that reminded Susan of marble. It had 4 arms and walked with unnatural grace. Most, disturbing were its eyes, solid black orbs that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Commander Susan Kelly," it said in a voice that sounded like several people speaking at once. "I am Emissary Vrel of the Varan Collective. We have been observing your species for some time." Susan straightened her uniform jacket. Her training hadn't prepared her for this, but she wouldn't show fear. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you. May I ask why you've come to our planet?" The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "We come seeking partnership. Our worlds are rich in technology, but poor in certain resources abundant on Earth. We offer exchange that will benefit both our peoples." Over the next few days, the Varan demonstrated technologies beyond human imagination. They showed world leaders how to produce clean energy that could power cities for pennies. They displayed medical devices that could cure diseases thought untreatable. Military officials were given glimpses of defensive systems that made nuclear weapons look like toys. In return, they asked only for mining rights in unpopulated areas and permission to establish small bases around the world. The deals were signed within a week. Dr. Alan Wright wasn't convinced. The star charts the VRN provided showing their home system didn't match any known configuration. He spent sleepless nights comparing their claims against astronomical data. "The numbers don't add up," he told his colleague over a secure phone line. "Either they're lying about where they're from, or what? Or they're hiding something much bigger." Alan's concerns reached Susan through back channels. She had spent enough time with the VRN representatives to notice subtle behaviors that troubled her. The way they spoke about humans when they thought no one was listening. Their dismissive gestures toward Earth's leaders after meetings. Little things that added up to a disturbing picture when global communications began experiencing unexplained outages. 3 weeks after the VRN arrival, Susan tried to raise the alarm. But the world's governments were drunk on alien technology and promises of a better future. "You're being paranoid," her superior told her. "They've given us everything they promised. These glitches are just compatibility issues between our systems and theirs." But Alan had been monitoring the increasing number of VRN ships entering Earth orbit. What started as 7 had grown to more than 30. Their explanation about bringing specialists and scientists sounded reasonable, but the ships carried something else entirely. Susan was at the Pentagon when the attack began. Without warning, the lights went out. Backup generators failed to engage. Outside, the Viren ships activated powerful energy weapons that targeted military installations with surgical precision. "They're hitting command centers first," Susan shouted as she helped evacuate staff from the burning building. "Air Force bases, naval yards, Army headquarters, all simultaneously." The pattern was the same worldwide. Human military capability was reduced by 60% in the first hour. The Viren had studied Earth's defenses carefully and knew exactly where to strike. By nightfall, major cities were under Viren control. Their ground forces moved with terrifying efficiency, their superior weapons making resistance nearly impossible. Tanks and fighter jets proved useless against their energy shields. Conventional ammunition couldn't penetrate their armor. Allen watched from his observatory as fires burned across the landscape. He had gathered a small group of colleagues and their families, using the remote location as temporary shelter. "They played us perfectly," he said, staring at satellite images showing Viren occupation zones expanding by the hour. "Made us think they were saviors while positioning for attack." A young researcher looked up from her computer. "I've been analyzing their broadcasts. They're calling this Operation Harvest. They refer to Earth as Test World 17. Test World?" Allen frowned. "You mean we're not the first? It doesn't look like it." Susan had escaped Washington with a small group of military personnel. They established a makeshift base in an abandoned mining facility in West Virginia. "We need to understand what they want," she told the survivors gathered around battery-powered lanterns. "This isn't just conquest. The way they're rounding people up, setting up processing centers, they're looking for something specific." As the first terrible night of occupation ended, dawn revealed a changed world. Viren ships now dominated the skies over every continent. Alien soldiers patrolled city streets. Humanity had been conquered in less than 24 hours, but in hidden places, mountain cabins, underground bunkers, remote farms, people like Allen and Susan began to plan. The invasion was complete, but something the Viren would learn about humans in the coming months. The war had only just begun. 6 months passed since the day the sky filled with alien ships. Winter had come and gone. Now spring brought green leaves back to the trees, but little hope returned to the people living under Viren control. George Baker looked nothing like a hero at 45, with a slight build and thinning hair. He had been a high school history teacher before the invasion. Now he led people through sewers and abandoned subway tunnels beneath Chicago, guiding them away from the processing centers. "Stay close," he whispered to the family following him. A mother, father, and 2 small children huddled together in the dim light of his covered flashlight. "We're almost to the safe point." The Viren had established processing centers in every major city. People were taken there for evaluation. Few returned, and those who did came back changed. They spoke of tests designed to break the human spirit. Physical pain was only the beginning. The aliens studied fear, hope, and despair as if they were collecting data for some terrible experiment. George had saved 17 families so far. His knowledge of the city's underground network made him valuable to the growing resistance. Tonight would be his 18th rescue if all went well. Above ground, in what had once been Chicago Memorial Hospital, Nurse Olivia Martinez prepared medication trays. The Viren had converted the hospital into a research facility. They kept human medical staff to care for their test subjects. Olivia had volunteered, though her reasons weren't what the aliens believed. "The subject in room 12 requires hydration," said a tall Viren supervisor. "The aliens always use the word subject instead of patient." "Yes, supervisor," Olivia replied with downcast eyes. She had learned to appear submissive while missing nothing. Her real work happened when no one watched. In her pocket, she carried a small notebook where she recorded everything she observed about Viren biology. Their breathing patterns, how they reacted to different temperatures, which medications seemed to affect them. The smallest detail might someday become important. One Viarn in particular interested her. Unlike the others, this one sometimes spoke to her as if she were an equal. She had begun to think of it as scientist, though all Varu looked nearly identical to human eyes. The subject shows unusual resistance, scientists told her that evening while they observed a man strapped to a bed. Most break after 3 sessions. This one has endured 7. Humans vary greatly, Olivia said carefully. Some have stronger will than others. Scientists made a clicking sound she had come to recognize as interest. What creates such variation? Is it genetic, environmental? Olivia saw an opportunity. Perhaps if I knew more about your research goals, I could help identify suitable subjects. For a moment, she thought she had gone too far. Scientists stared at her with those empty black eyes. Then it did something unexpected. It showed her a data screen. We seek to understand what makes humans fight when defeat is certain, scientists said. Other species surrendered when shown superior force. Humans continue to resist despite knowing they cannot win. Olivia struggled to keep her face neutral as she realized the truth. The Viaran weren't just cruel. They were conducting a planet-wide experiment in breaking human will. Far from Chicago, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, Jack Phillips led a different kind of resistance. The former Marine had gathered a group of 30 fighters in a hidden valley camp. Their early attempts to fight back had been disastrous. We lost 4 good people yesterday, Jack told his second-in-command as they sat by a small fire. The spring night was cold in the mountains. The Viaran weapons cut through our best body armor like it's paper. We hurt them too, she replied. That patrol won't be bothering anyone again. Jack nodded but felt no satisfaction. For every Viaran they managed to kill, the aliens destroyed an entire community in retaliation. The math was grim. We need to be smarter, he said. We can't win by fighting them directly. That night Jack couldn't sleep. He walked to the edge of their camp and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there were more Viaran ships. How many worlds had they conquered before Earth? How many species had they broken? Jack was still watching the sky when one of his scouts returned with news. We found something, the scout said, out of breath from running. A damaged Viaran shuttle. Crashed about 10 miles north. No survivors. For the first time in months, Jack felt a spark of hope. Get everyone ready. We move in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Diane Lewis worked in darkness. The basement of an abandoned office building had become her home. Before the invasion, she had been a programmer for a cybersecurity company. Now she used those skills to intercept Viaran communications. The aliens used technology far beyond human understanding, but they still needed to transmit signals. Those signals could be captured, even if decoding them seemed impossible. At first, Diane had been working on the problem for months, sleeping only when her body demanded it. Progress came in tiny steps, a pattern recognized here. A repeated sequence. There, tonight, something finally clicked. Oh my God, she whispered as her screen filled with partially translated text. The Viaran weren't just talking to each other. They were reporting to someone. Someone far away. The message contained references to previous harvest worlds and resistance metrics. One phrase stood out clearly. Earth subjects show highest breaking point variance of all test species. Diane's hands shook as she saved the data to a secure drive. She needed to get this information to others. The Viaran weren't invincible conquerors. They were scientists conducting cruel experiments. And somewhere in their records was evidence of a world where they had failed. In Wyoming, Alan Wright made his own discovery. The makeshift observatory he had established in an old ranch house allowed him to study the Viaran ships. Their movement patterns, energy signatures, and atmospheric interactions all told a story. They're not comfortable here, he told his small team. Look at these readings. Their ships maintain internal environments much different from Earth's atmosphere. He pointed to data showing the Viaran never remove their fitted suits when outside their ships. They need those suits to survive here. Earth itself is hostile to them. As dawn broke across America, these separate threads of resistance began to connect. George's Underground Railroad. Olivia's medical intelligence. Jack's captured shuttle. Diane's intercepted communications. Alan's environmental discovery. 6 months of occupation had taught humanity a hard lesson. They couldn't win by fighting the VRN directly, but perhaps they could win by understanding them, by finding weaknesses. By being what humans had always been best at being, adaptable. The VRN believed they were breaking humanity. They didn't realize they were only making humans stronger. Diane Lewis hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes burned as she stared at her computer screen. The basement where she worked smelled of old coffee and circuit boards, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was the breakthrough glowing on her monitor. "I've got it," she whispered to herself. After months of work, she had finally cracked enough of the VRN communication code to understand their messages. What she found sent chills down her spine. Earth wasn't their first target. The VRN had done this before, many times. They traveled from world to world, testing different species, measuring how long they took to break. They called it harvesting. Resilience data, but one file stood out. A report about a planet called Nexus 7 where the VRN had failed. The aliens had actually retreated. Diane's hands trembled as she read the translated text. The species on Nexus 7 had discovered a weakness in VRN technology and exploited it. Diane needed to share this information. She connected to the secret network the Resistance had built, sending encrypted messages to key contacts across the country. One of those messages reached Alan Wright in Wyoming. The astronomer had turned his skills towards studying the VRN themselves rather than the stars. His makeshift lab contained air samples from near VRN landing sites and data on their ship emissions. "They're struggling to adapt," he told his small team as they gathered around a worn wooden table. "Earth's atmosphere has more oxygen than they prefer. Their environmental suits compensate, but it's a vulnerability." He pointed to a chart showing VRN activity patterns. "Notice how they limit exposure time? How they rotate personnel more frequently. During high humidity days, water vapor affects them. Maybe their skin absorbs it in harmful ways." One of his team, a former chemistry professor, leaned forward. "If we could find a way to compromise their environmental systems." "Exactly," Alan said. "We don't need to defeat their weapons. We just need to make Earth itself their enemy." In Chicago, Olivia continued her careful observation of the aliens. Her notebook was now filled with detailed notes about VRN biology. The alien she called scientist had unwittingly become her best source of information. "Your species continues to perplex us," scientists told her one evening as they monitored test subjects. "Some humans break quickly under stress. Others resist." Despite increasing pain, Olivia kept her face neutral though her heart pounded. "Perhaps you're using the wrong approach. Humans respond to different things." Scientists turned those black eyes toward her. "Explain." This was dangerous territory, but Olivia saw an opportunity. Physical pain is just one type of pressure. Humans also respond to sound, light, social connection. Some stimuli are more effective than others. As she spoke, she noticed how scientists flinched slightly when the overhead lights flickered. It wasn't the first time she'd seen VRN react to certain light patterns. She filed the observation away in her memory. "Interesting theory," scientists said. "I will design new test protocols." That night, Olivia slipped away during her break. She had discovered the VRN avoided certain areas of the hospital basement where old fluorescent lights created a particular flickering pattern. Now she was sure they were sensitive to specific light frequencies. But how could that be used against them? The damaged VRN shuttle gave Jack Phillips and his Resistance fighters their first real hope. They had moved it to an abandoned mine shaft where it couldn't be detected from orbit. Now they watched as Paul Wilson, a former aerospace engineer, methodically studied its systems. "Their technology isn't magic," Paul said, wiping grease from his hands. "Advanced, yes, but it follows physical laws. The propulsion system uses electromagnetic fields in ways we haven't mastered, but I understand the principles." Jack peered at the exposed components. "Can we use any of this?" Paul nodded slowly. "The communication system is most interesting. It operates on frequencies that seem to interfere with their neural patterns. That's why they shield these components so heavily. He pointed to a damaged section of the craft. When this was breached, it probably caused the Viren pilot severe pain. So their own technology can hurt them, Jack said thoughtfully. If we could replicate that frequency, we could create a weapon that doesn't need to penetrate their armor, Paul finished. It would attack their nervous system directly. The pieces were coming together. Diane's discovery about previous Viren failures, Alan's findings about their environmental vulnerabilities, Olivia's observations about light sensitivity, Paul's insights into their technology. George Baker's underground network became the crucial link. As he guided more families to safety, he also carried information between resistance cells. Folded papers hidden in his jacket contained coded messages about Viren weaknesses. One night, as George led a group through Chicago's abandoned tunnels, they heard Viren patrols above. Everyone froze, barely breathing. Then something strange happened. The service lights in the tunnel began to flicker due to power fluctuations. Through a grate in the ceiling, George saw the Viren soldiers above suddenly stagger and reach for their helmets. "Everyone stay still," he whispered, watching carefully. The flickering intensified, and the Viren actually retreated, moving away from the area. Once they were gone, George examined the lights. They were old, fluorescent tubes pulsing. At an irregular rate due to failing ballasts, George carefully noted the exact location and light pattern. This accidental discovery might be important. When he delivered his next batch of messages, he included this observation. The information eventually reached Alan, who connected it with his own research and Olivia's notes. They're sensitive to light in the 15 to 17 Hz range, Alan told his team after analyzing all the data. That frequency disrupts their neural pathways somehow. We could use modified strobes as non-lethal weapons. Meanwhile, Diane made another breakthrough decrypting Viren communications. Their command structure was rigid and centralized. Each region had one commander who reported directly to the overseer, the supreme Viren authority on Earth. If communications between units were disrupted, they struggled to coordinate effectively. "They don't adapt quickly," she wrote in her report. "They follow protocols exactly, even when situations change. It's a weakness we can exploit." As summer approached, these separate discoveries began flowing between resistance groups. Simple radio transmitters, carefully shielded from Viren detection, carried coded messages across the country. Each small victory, each new understanding of the enemy, spread hope. The Viren had come to break humanity. Instead, they had given humans a common enemy and purpose. In basements and mountain hideouts, in abandoned tunnels and secret labs, people worked together. The pieces of a counterattack were falling into place. The Viren believed themselves to be the ultimate predators, conducting their cruel experiments with clinical detachment. They failed to understand the fundamental truth about the species they sought to break. Humans were at their most dangerous when the situation seemed most hopeless. 3 years had passed since the day the Viren ships darkened Earth's skies. 3 years of occupation, struggle, and growing resistance. Now the tide was turning. Susan Kelly stood on a hill overlooking what had once been Seattle. The city looked different now, dominated by the massive Viren command center in its heart. Tonight, that would change. "All teams report ready," Jack said, joining her at the observation point. The former Marine had a new scar across his face, but his eyes burned with the same determination she'd seen since they joined forces a year ago. "Alan's devices are in position," Susan replied. "Diane has their communication frequencies mapped. It's time." The plan they had worked toward for months was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Attack the Viren command center, capture or kill the overseer, and break the aliens' control structure. The resistance had grown from scattered groups into an organized force of thousands. Susan raised her radio. "All teams, Operation Daybreak is go. I repeat, Daybreak is go." Across the city perimeter, resistance fighters activated devices designed by Alan Wright and Paul Wilson. The machines emitted specific light frequencies and sounds that disrupted Viren neural pathways without harming humans. Vera and soldiers began stumbling. Disoriented and unable to fight effectively, George Baker led a team through underground tunnels, emerging inside the VRN security perimeter. They carried modified strobe weapons that flashed at precisely 16.4 Hz, the frequency most painful to VRN nervous systems. "Remember, 10-second bursts only," George told his team. "Then move forward." While they're disoriented, above the city, the Resistance's greatest achievement soared into position. They had rebuilt and modified the crashed VRN shuttle, creating their own flying weapon. Paul Wilson piloted it, using the alien technology against its creators. In position," he radioed. "Beginning electronic warfare sequence." The modified shuttle broadcast signals that mimicked VRN command codes but contained destructive programming. VRN communication systems began failing across the city. Without central coordination, the alien soldiers fell into confusion. Inside the VR medical facility, Olivia Martinez moved quickly. For 3 years, she had played the role of cooperative human helper. Tonight, her true purpose was revealed. "This way," she told the group of test subjects she had just freed. "Stay close and stay quiet." Months earlier, she had memorized the building's layout and security systems. Now she led 20 former prisoners toward freedom, carrying with her the most complete records of VRN biology ever compiled. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with scientists. The VRN stood motionless, those black eyes fixed on Olivia. For a moment, neither moved. Then, surprisingly, scientists stepped aside. "The experiment is concluded," it said in that strange multi-voice. "Your species has provided unexpected data." Olivia hesitated. "You're letting us go?" "I am a scientist." "First," it replied, "the results are clear. Humans cannot be broken as other species were. The overseer refuses to accept this conclusion, but data does not lie." With that, scientists turned and walked away. Olivia didn't understand fully, but there was no time to consider it. She hurried her group toward the rendezvous point. At the command center's main entrance, Jack led the primary assault team, using the weapons and tactics developed over 3 years of resistance. They fought their way inside. The VRN were powerful, but the humans had surprise and desperation on their side. More importantly, they had turned the aliens' weaknesses against them. "Control room is 2 levels up," Jack shouted over the sound of combat. "Susan, take your team up the east stairs. We'll go west and catch them in a crossfire." Susan nodded and signaled her fighters forward. The hallways were filled with flickering emergency lights that happened to pulse at frequencies painful to VRN, whether by luck or design. The building's power fluctuations were helping the human assault. Fighting was intense. Humans fell. VRN died. But the resistance pushed forward, driven by memories of 3 years under alien control. In her communications center several miles away, Diane Lewis monitored VRN transmissions. Their once orderly communication was descending into chaos. "There. Calling for reinforcements from orbit," she radioed to Susan. "But something's wrong. The ships aren't responding correctly." Diane listened more carefully to the broken alien transmissions. I think some of the ships are leaving orbit. They're retreating." On the command center's top floor, Susan and Jack's teams finally converged outside the overseer's chamber. The massive doors were sealed. "Plant the charges," Jack ordered. Explosives were placed precisely where Paul had determined the locking mechanism would be. The blast shook the building. As smoke cleared, the humans rushed into the overseer's private domain. The chamber was vast, filled with strange technology and monitoring screens showing scenes from around the world. The overseer itself was different from other VRN, larger, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. It sat in a throne-like chair surrounded by control panels, but something was wrong. The overseer didn't rise to fight. It remained seated, breathing labored, skin color fading. "You are too late," it said as Susan and Jack approached cautiously. And yet perfectly timed. Susan kept her weapon aimed at the alien. "What do you mean?" The overseer's laugh was a disturbing sound. "My environmental systems failed hours ago. Earth's atmosphere is poison to me without protection. I'm already dying. Jack didn't lower his weapon. Then we'll just speed up the process. Wait, Susan said. I want answers first. Why Earth? Why torture humans? The overseer's color shifted again, weaker now. Testing, always testing. The collective needs warriors, servants who can fight but will obey. Most species break easily. Except domination after showing sufficient force. It gestured weakly at the screens showing resistance victories across the globe. Humans never broke, you adapted. Found our weaknesses, evolved your tactics, extraordinary. The aliens' breathing became more labored. You were never meant to be a permanent colony, just another test world. But you proved exceptional. Susan stepped closer. Are you saying this was all just an experiment? Millions dead for a test? The strong survive, the overseer whispered. You are strong. The collective will return, better prepared next time. With those ominous words, the overseer's colors faded completely. It slumped in its chair, dead. Outside, the Viron forces were in full retreat. Without the overseer's commands, they fell back to their ships. Across the world, the scene repeated as humans reclaimed their cities. 1 week later, representatives from resistance groups worldwide gathered in the old United Nations building in New York. The damage from 3 years of occupation was everywhere. But so were the signs of rebuilding. Susan stood at the podium addressing the assembly. We've won a battle, not the war. The overseer's final warning was clear. They will return. She gestured to where Alan, Paul, Diane, George, Olivia, and other resistance leaders sat. But we are not the same people they attacked 3 years ago. We've learned, we've grown stronger. We've taken their technology and improved upon it. Susan looked out at the faces watching her, tired, scarred, but undefeated. Humanity faced its greatest challenge and refused to break. Instead, we fought. Back, whatever comes next, we will face it together. Outside the building, people worked to clear rubble and rebuild. The Viron ships had disappeared from Earth's skies, but everyone knew the stars now held both promise and threat. Earth would never again be caught unprepared. The Viron had tried to break humanity. Instead, they had forged it into something stronger. Whatever returned from the stars would not find an easy conquest, but a united planet ready to defend itself. The end was really just the beginning. 3 years had passed since the day the Viron ships first appeared in Earth's skies. The world had changed. Cities lay in ruins. Millions had died, but something else had changed too. Humanity had adapted, learned, and grown stronger. The Viron no longer controlled Earth. They held only a few strongholds, mainly their landing zones and command centers. The largest of these was in what used to be Seattle, where the overseer directed the remaining Viron forces. Susan Kelly stood on a hill, overlooking the ruins of the city. Through binoculars, she could see the massive Viron command center. 3 years ago, she had been a Navy commander meeting aliens for the first time. Now she was General Kelly, leader of the Western Resistance Forces. The intel is solid, Jack, Philip said beside her. He had come a long way from his small band of fighters in the Appalachian Mountains. Now he commanded the Special Operations Division, hardened warriors who specialized in Viron weaknesses. Diane's team intercepted their communications. The overseer is definitely inside. Susan lowered her binoculars. And our forces? In position. George's people have mapped every tunnel and sewer entrance. Olivia's modified strobe weapons have been distributed. Alan's atmospheric disruptors are ready. Susan nodded. Then it's time. The plan they had developed was the result of 3 years of learning about the enemy. No single discovery had turned the tide. It was the combination of many small advantages exploited by humans who refused to surrender. The attack began at dawn. First came the atmospheric disruptors, devices Alan Wright had designed to increase water vapor in the air around Viron positions. The aliens' environmental suits could compensate, but the extra strain on their systems made them vulnerable. Next came Olivia's contribution. Teams equipped with modified strobe lights approached Viron patrols. The carefully calibrated light patterns disrupted Viron neural systems, causing disorientation and pain. For the first time, humans could disable Viren soldiers without firing a shot. Meanwhile, Paul Wilson's team activated jammers built from salvaged Viren technology. These devices broadcast on frequencies that interfered with Viren communications and their neural implants, cut off from the Overseer's commands. Many Viren units fell into confusion. The human assault teams moved through the tunnels George Baker had mapped. They emerged inside VRN defensive perimeters, bypassing the strongest alien positions. The fighting was still fierce. VRN weapons could still kill with a single shot. But humans now had countermeasures and tactics developed through years of hard experience. In her command post, Diane Lewis monitored VRN communications. "They're calling for reinforcements from orbit," she reported over the secure channel. "But there's no response." This was the most hopeful sign. For months, they had observed fewer VRN supply ships arriving. Some intercepted messages suggested problems elsewhere in the alien empire. Perhaps other worlds were fighting back too. The battle for Seattle raged through the day. Human casualties mounted, but the resistance forces pushed steadily toward the central command tower. By afternoon, they had breached the outer defenses. Jack led the final assault team. They moved through corridors where the air had been modified to weaken VRN resistance. Strobe weapons cleared the way. Behind them came engineers who understood how to disable VRN technology. "The Overseer should be on the top level," Jack told his team as they prepared to ascend. "Remember your training? No heroics. We do this together." The final push cost many brave lives. VRN defenders fought with the desperation of those who know defeat is near, but nothing could stop the human advance. Too much had been sacrificed to reach this point. When Jack and Susan finally entered the Overseer's chamber, they found something unexpected. The Supreme VRN commander lay slumped in a control chair. Its environmental suit had been damaged in the fighting. Exposure to Earth's atmosphere was already taking its toll. "You have surprised us," the Overseer said, its voice weak but still carrying that strange multitonal quality. "No species has ever done this before." Susan approached cautiously, weapon ready. "Why did you come here? Why attack us?" The Overseer made a sound that might have been laughter. "Attack? No, this was evaluation. We seed worlds with our testing units to find worthy adversaries." "You killed millions of people for a test?" Jack's voice shook with anger. "Many species. We test break quickly, they surrender, become compliant. Those we leave alone, they are not useful." The Overseer's breathing became labored. "But you humans, you adapted? You found our weaknesses? You never stopped fighting." Susan's eyes narrowed. "And what happens to species that pass your test? They become either allies or enemies. The choice is theirs." The Overseer gestured weakly toward a control panel. "The signal has already been sent. The full VRN collective knows of your resistance. They will come." "Are they coming to destroy us or to talk?" Susan asked. "That depends on what you do next." The Overseer's black eyes fixed on her. "Kill me, continue fighting, and they will see enemies. Seek understanding, and they might see potential allies." Before Susan could respond, the alien shuddered and went still. Its body had finally succumbed to Earth's hostile environment. In the days that followed, the remaining VRN forces retreated to their ships. Across the world, they abandoned their positions and returned to orbit. Within a week, the massive vessels began to leave Earth's atmosphere, but intercepted communications told a troubling story. The VRN were not giving up. They were withdrawing to report to the larger collective. And they would return, possibly with a much larger force. 1 month after the Battle of Seattle, representatives from resistance groups worldwide gathered in the old United Nations building in New York. The structure was damaged but still standing. Much like humanity itself, Susan stood before the assembled leaders. "We face a choice," she said. "The VRN will return. We can prepare for more war, or we can try something different." She gestured to where Alan, Olivia, Paul, George, and Diane sat in the front row. "These people and thousands like them helped us survive by understanding our enemy. Maybe understanding is the path forward." A man stood from the African delegation. How can we trust the VRN after what they did? We don't have to trust them, Susan replied. But we can learn from them. Pohl's team has already reversed engineered VRN technology that could defend Earth against future attacks. Alan has designed early warning systems that will prevent another surprise invasion. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people who had fought and suffered. The VRN came to test us, to break us. They failed. Now we have a chance to show them, and ourselves, what humanity does after survival. Do we just prepare for the next fight? Or do we build something better while staying ready to defend it? The debate continued for days. In the end, they formed a new global council to coordinate Earth's recovery and defense. Work began immediately on a planetary shield system using modified VRN technology. Cities were rebuilt. People began to hope again, and far above, at the edge of the solar system, automated beacons watched for the return of alien ships. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Whatever came next, peace or war, Earth would face it united. The VRN had tried to break humanity. Instead, they had forged it into something stronger. The stars no longer seemed like distant points of light. They were destinations and potential threats. Humanity looked to the cosmos with new eyes, cautious, determined, and unbroken.